Hello and welcome back to my channel. Valentine's Day is coming up, so I'm going to show you how to make a beaded heart like this. There's a brush component attached to the back. This heart is made using the bead embroidery technique, so I will give you some basics so you know how to do it. I want the heart to be nice and regular, so I'm not going to draw it by hand, but I'm going to find a pattern online and print it out. I cut out the heart and copy on the beading foundation. This is Lacy's Stiff Stuff Beading Foundation. It's a heavy-duty non-woven fabric. It's stiff as a cardboard, but a needle will glide right through it very easily. You can color it to match your beadwork. Most often it can be only found in white, but it also comes in 3 other colors: black, red and blue. But I haven't seen them here in the Czech Republic yet, only in white, so I'm buying white and dyeing it. I guess the easiest way is with permanent markers. I use Sharpie markers. The advantage is that you can color in the parts as you sew, and if you are doing some multicolor beadwork, you can easily make color gradients. They can also be dyed with red dyes. You can also put it in a printer and simply print a pattern on it. Not many people know that. Or you can use an iron-on transfer to apply your pattern onto it. Of course, if you don't want to, you don't have to color the background at all. You can leave it white. But it's just better if the background color matches the color of the beads. Or somebody uses a universal bead foundation color and dyes the whole sheets of Lacy Stiff Stuff a neutral color, beige or gray. And then he uses that with whatever color beads he wants. That's about it in a nutshell. Maybe we'll talk more about it in another video sometime. You can cut it as you want, the edges will not fray. It's also great that even when you soak it, it holds its shape, doesn't deform or stretch. So I cut off the corner here to make it round, so that the thread wouldn't get caught when sewing. I've prepared a lot of beads here, so I will see. Some of it I'll use, some of it maybe not. I have some idea of what it should look like, but I know myself. Most of the time everything ends up different afterwards anyway. So I'll definitely frame the heart first. It's called French wire, and this is the sturdier one used for framing. And then there's a softer, finer one, and that's used for the inner structures. I'm not sure if I will use it yet. I will see, but I will definitely use this one for framing. And for sewing the French wire, I will use this monofilament thread, also known as invisible nylon. As you can see, it's very thin thread. It's 0.15 millimeters in diameter. I simply tie a knot in the back like this. I'll cut off the excess so we don't have too many threads, and I'm gonna pierce the foundation somewhere around the edge. I'll attach the end of the French wire. I will sew it on a few times to keep it nice, to keep the connection strong. Now I will proceed step by step. I'll be doing small stitches, and I'm going to sew the French wire around the entire circumference of the heart. And of course, I'll keep shaping it. It's going quite slowly, but I think the result will be worth it. When I started with beads, with bead embroidery, I didn't use this framing at all. You can do without it. It doesn't hurt anything if you don't have it there. But I think it takes the work to another level. It just looks better. At least I think so. When we get to the corner, we simply bend the wire in this way. And I cut the end off to make a nice connection. and I'll sew the end back on a few times to make it hold tight, to hold it nicely in place like it's supposed to. Alright, we got a heart sewn around the edge. I'm gonna make a knot in the back here and cut it off. Now I'm gonna try to lay it out the way I want it to look. I always place big crystals or other large elements first, and then I work out the details. I'm gonna stick some rivoli on the left side here. You can glue them with different glues. E6000 is great. Sometimes I just use these glue dots. They hold very firmly and you don't have to wait for them to dry. Since I'll bead around the rivoli, bezel the rivoli in with Peyote stitch, I can only glue them on with glue dots, so they'll stay in place. But of course, if I didn't bead around them and no other beads were holding them, I would use E6000 glue. So the first thing I'm gonna do is the Peyote bezel to keep my crystals in place. I'm going to use Nymo thread. Tie a knot in the back. I'll cut off the excess thread. And I go with my needle close to the crystal. Pick up 2 beads. It's Preciosa size 10. And I will use a backstitch. I slide the beads down to my foundation. Just in front of the beads, I stick the needle in. I'm gonna go back in front of the first bead, and I go with my needle through both beads. I pick another 2 beads, slide them down. We pull them down so that we know how far to insert the needle. I don't often do that anymore though, because I have an estimate of how far the 2 beads will go. I usually only do it with bugle beads, for example. And now I'm gonna stick the needle back 3 beads and go with my needle through those 3 beads. And I'm gonna tighten it up a little bit and straighten it out. Pick up another 2 beads. I'll put the needle right in front of the last bead. And 3 beads back again. And go with my needle through those 3 beads. We always sew on 2 new beads. Go back 3 beads and sew the needle through these 3 beads. And we bezel in the whole crystal. Just be careful that when you make a peyote bezel, you need an even number of beads in the first row. So when you close the circle, always think if it's better to add 2 more beads, if they still fit, or if you close the circle already. But don't just add 1 bead. I already said that in a video, actually it was a video where I talked about what threads to choose for bead weaving. So that's where I just said that if you are starting bead weaving, feel free to start with this Nymo thread. As you get more practice, you will probably move on to some better and more expensive threads anyway, and then you can use the Nymo nicely for bead embroidery. I think Nymo is totally awesome for bead embroidery. I use either Nymo or monofilament thread. The monofilament thread I used for the heart border. As you can see, the bead embroidery is quite time consuming, especially the beading around the crystals is very time consuming. I will show you the backstitch in more detail. I'll make a knot to secure the beginning of the thread. I will use red thread, turquoise beads and white backing so you can see it all nicely. To contrast, I'll cut off the excess thread. I go with my needle through the beading foundation. This is the back side and this is the front side. I pick up 2 beads. I'm gonna pull them down to the foundation to see where they are reaching, and I stick the needle right in front of the bead. I'll go back to the beginning, and I'm gonna go with my needle through both beads. I'm gonna pick up 2 more beads, pull them down to the foundation again, stick the needle in front of the beads, and go back 3 beads. And I'm gonna go with my needle through 3 beads. Except for the first step, I always pull the needle back through 3 beads. Add 2 beads again and go back through 3 beads. From the other side it looks something like this. It's quite tempting to add multiple beads at once, but I don't really recommend that because it moves around quite a bit. It's not very stable and it doesn't look nice. On the other hand, sometimes you only need to add 1 bead. So you add 1, you go back through 2, 3, you will see according to the situation. So now we have completed the first row of a bead bezel. And we'll continue with peyote stitch, peyote bezel. I pick up 1 bead, skip the very next bead. The thread is coming out of this bead, so I skip the very next bead and go with my needle through the next bead. It's an ordinary peyote stitch. I pick up another bead, skip the very next bead and go through the next bead. Again the same, skip the very next bead and go through the second bead and continue to the end of the second row. If you want to watch a separate video on the peyote stitch, I will put a link up here. There you can learn even count peyote, and on my channel you can also find a tutorial on the odd count peyote. But for this beading around, you work with an even number of beads. Now we need to step up to the next row. That means that we normally skip the very next bead, go through the second, and at the same time pull the needle through the first bead of the second row. This is called step up. So now we are going to sew a third row. As you can see, every other bead sticks out, so we sew 1 bead into each gap. I pick up a seed bead and go with my needle through the next popped up bead. Pull tight. That's how we sew the third row. Now we need to step up again. That means that we go with our needle through these 2 beads on diagonal. And we are in the 4th row. I will use smaller beads for the 4th row. These are size 15. I almost always sew the last row with smaller beads to make the circumference of the last row smaller and to keep the crystal there. And I can continue with peyote stitch. I will skip 1 bead here to make a nice tip. I want it to be more pointed, so I just thread the needle through without the bead and tighten. And then I continue normally with the beads. I sew the last bead and do the step up. That means that I'm going through these 2 beads on diagonal. And now I need to go to the back side, so I go through the beads towards the foundation. And I'll tie a knot here on the other side. If we happen to have a break in somewhere, only one part will start to break and the whole job won't fall apart. so the eventual repair would be easier. That's the whole point of me doing knots all over the place. Now I'm gonna turn it back around, and I'm going to bezel in this small rivoli. I go with my needle next to the rivoli, and I'll sew the same way again. That means that I pick up 2 seed beads, so these 2 beads, go back and pass the needle through both beads. And do the classic backstitch. Pick up another 2 beads, sew them. I'm going back 3 beads and go with my needle through all 3 beads. It's always the same. It's totally cool that you can use all kinds of leftover beads for bead embroidery. This means that if I'm doing a bead weaving project where I need a certain given number of beads, I can't experiment too much. I have a few beads left over, and what do I do with them? They aren't enough for another bead weaving project, so I will use them for bead embroidery. It doesn't matter here. I can just use 1 bead I have left. It won't look bad at all. There's no limit to the imagination here. I even have a box where I keep various leftover beads that would be hard to use otherwise. And whenever I do a bead embroidery project, I incorporate some of them. It's great that the bead embroidery looks very nice. It's not hard at all to make it. You just sew the beads onto a backing of some sort. But anyone who doesn't know how to do it will say, wow, that must be tricky to make. But it's actually not complicated. It's just time consuming. You basically just need to know how to do backstitch and how to bezel in a crystal. You'll be completely fine with this. So, to summarize, it's simple. You don't have to learn any complicated stitches. You can get by with a backstitch and a peyote stitch. You can simply use leftover beads. You can also use some irregular beads this way. So, I do a classic peyote again. I skip the very next bead and go through the second bead. Now I'm gonna take this thin French wire here, the flexible one, and this is how I'm gonna cut it into little pieces. I will try to keep them about the same. I'm gonna cut off a piece of monofilament thread. I will make a knot on the other side. I'll cut off the excess thread. And I go with my needle to the edge here. I'm going to sew here according to this line I've drawn. I pick up a piece of French wire, slide it down, sew through the foundation to keep the wire in place, go back to the edge, and I go with my needle through the wire. Pick up another, slide it down, and do exactly the same. I'm gonna try to get between 2 pieces of wire, and I go through the one I've just added. Don't worry, it won't look this bad. These pieces of wire will actually be all covered up. I just need to use them as a filler to lift the wires above them. Now I go with my needle next through the French wire. I pick up another piece and I go with my needle to the other side of the wire. I'll cross the wire like this. And I will continue the same way. I'll cross from right to left. And I'm gonna sew a backstitch around here. I pick up 2 beads, sew them, go back to the edge, and go through both beads. Pick up another 2 beads, sew them, and now 3 beads back. And I go with my needle through all 3 beads. Now I need to get away from this rivoli. And I'll continue here. So remember, we always pick up 2 beads and then 3 beads going back. Except when I sew the first 2 beads. I can't go back 3 beads when I only have 2. So I only go back 2 beads. When you've been sewing like this for a while, it's tempting not to sew 2 beads at a time, not to pick up just 2 beads, but to pick up more beads, 4, 5, 6. But I've tried it, and of course it's faster, but you can tell a bit on the work. Not too much, but you can just see that's a little off, that the beads aren't sewn on perfectly. Especially on the bracelets that bend, you can see it in the bends. And sometimes some of the beads come off the backing, which I think it's a pity. Even if you sew multiple beads at once, it's still very time consuming, and when you are doing something that's challenging, you want it to look nice. So I think it's better to do it properly or not do it at all. The beads can also be layered in different ways. 2 or 3 beads on top of each other. And I always finish with a size 15 bead. I'll make a stop with it to hold it in place. There, we are done. You can see that we have a lot of threads on the back side here. That's alright, don't mind that at all. We are going to cover it with ultra suede. Now we are going to cut the heart around the edge, but we have to be careful not to cut any of the threads. We have to be very, very careful. I'll take the Sharpie now and I'm gonna paint the edges a little bit. I'll get my ultra suede ready. It's a synthetic ultra microfiber fabric. It feels like natural suede, but it's resistant to stains and discoloration. It's a very, very nice material. I'll take the brush component. This one is 4 centimeters. Of course, choose one that matches the size of your brush. Then I'm gonna cut off a piece of Lacy stiff stuff. I'm gonna make a mark here and cut a piece off like this to hold the brush component in place a little bit. I'm gonna get some glue here. I'll attach the brush component. I'm gonna put a little more glue up here. I'm gonna put some glue on the foundation and I'm gonna cover the back of the brush component like this. It will hold it in place better. And I let it dry. If you want, you can sew the brush component on there, or a combination of sew and glue, it's up to you. I'm gonna put my hat on the backing. I turn it over and I cut both ends where I have the brush component. I'll make it a little bigger. I apply glue to the back, not all the way to the edge. We'll leave some room to sew the edge beads on, and I'll attach the backing. I'm gonna go find the cutouts. We've got the brush component positioned nicely like this, and I will let it dry again. And when it's dry, I will cut a backing to match the foundation. I'm not gonna do any overlap, I want it to be even. And now we are gonna bead it around the edge. I put an invisible monofilament thread back on my needle. I go with my needle through the top side, the foundation, just by foundation. I'm not gonna sew through the backing. And that's how I'm gonna make a knot. And I'm gonna cut the excess thread as close to the beadwork as I can so it doesn't show. Now I go with my needle through all layers and back through the backing and foundation. I pick up one bead and again I go with my needle through both layers, from bottom to top, just through the edge. We won't go too far. Don't put the needle behind the wire. And now I'm gonna pick up the bead from underneath and I'll tighten it. I pick up another bead and I'll sew through all layers again. And I pick up the bead like this from underneath and tighten. And do the same thing again. I will continue in the same way until the end. This will clean up the entire edge beautifully. I chose quite large beads, so it will be visible. But if you want to make the edges less noticeable, you could use size 15 beads. It will be a little less visible. But I thought it would look nice that way. And you don't just have to do a simple edge like that. You can use these beads as a base for sewing on some more embellishments. You can sew different transitions here. It's all up to your imagination. But I don't want to embellish it anymore. I don't want to overdo it. I think the heart is embellished enough itself. So I'm not going to sew any more beads there. I'm just going to sew around the edge like this. And maybe in the next video I will show you how you can decorate the edges there's a lot of possibilities. The only thing left to sew on is the last bead, so I'm going to fill in the last gap. You can see that the beads don't fit together very nicely. So to line them up, my thread is coming from this bead, so I'm gonna pull it through the one next to it and back up the next one. I'm gonna sew through it like this, and this way I get the beads to line up nicely. Now I need to weave the thread in, so I put the needle through the next bead and I'll only sew through the foundation. I'm not going stitch all the way through the backing. I'm gonna make a knot here. I'll tighten the knot and I'm gonna thread the needle through the foundation again. I'm not going to sew through the backing at all. And I'm gonna cut the thread as close to the beadwork as possible. And the heart is done.